Good evening, Earth. This is Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Edge in Taos, New Mexico, working on oil painting Suspended. Okay, so now we're going to have a little fun with the coloration. I'm going to glaze the whole thing yellow, or at least the bottom portion, pretty heavily with a translucent yellow, and then restripe some of the water to make it a little more watery with some vivid red, and then sort of make a mist out of some magenta, all mixed up with various levels of translucency. So here we go.
And now to apply the concepts in the context of a single individual mind. So we have in mind different parts which are somehow dynamical objects, where there's a cycling about, revolving over, that repeats a pattern or follows a track for a long time until we get out of that track into another one. This could be an entire paradigm, whatever that is. Say a paradigm is a bunch of basins, like instead of the red and the green, we could have 100 different colors, all of them kind of mixed up fractally, like this rug. And each of these colored regions might be a group of basins, but between the basins are thicker boundaries that make it more difficult to go through, reflected from the boundary, so that it takes a bigger perturbation in the world of thought in order to change this. We could call them paradigms, or personalities, or cubby holes in the mind. For example, when language came over us, I don't mean 25,000 years ago. Well, this process started 25,000 years ago, but in the history of a single individual. Then, at the age of 1 or 2 or 3 or something, when speech is beginning, what was going on before that? Presumably that was what everyone was doing before speech came all together, if there ever was such a time, and that childhood paradigm is not vaporized and replaced when the linguistic phase arrives. Instead, it's covered over and covered. It just takes another one of these phases. So that's an example of, we could call it multiple personality. And these regions of the mind normally should be, the boundaries should be fractal. That is to say, more like the sandy beach than like the Bauhaus concrete wall. In the case that some framing influence creates, instead of the natural sandy beach, a concrete wall, then it becomes very difficult to get from one to another. When there would be fractal beaches everywhere, then the slightest perturbation, a strange idea coming on the radio, would bop you just that millimeter, fraction of an inch, to get from the water to the sand, from the one paradigm to another. In a normal day in the life, with a lot of perturbation, one would rapidly be visiting them, all of the different regions or multiple personalities making up the self. So noise in the environment is sufficient to integrate the personality, but if there are iron curtains here and there, then it takes a very big perturbation to get out of one paradigm into another, and then you would see an individual manifesting multiple personality syndrome. So since this difficulty, in this model, which is inspired by Kurt Levine, the founder of social psychology, he had a kind of mathematical model for a mind, individual or social, that the basis of his invention of social psychology. In this model, the healthier state has these sandy beaches, and the basins, the colors are all mixed up. The pathological state has too much order, like after toilet training or something, with these concrete walls, iron curtains, So these iron curtains, I call them dischaos. So replacing the order disorder binary with dischaos and chaos binary, because we need more sandy beaches. So I would call this, as they do, multiple personality disorder. I call it the multiple personality dischaos. So that's a sandy beach model of a mind, which, if we were into clinical psychology, we could try developing, inventing a therapeutic strategy to increase chaos of, for example, visiting the river, listening to sound, walking in nature, as opposed to listening to the radio and watching the TV. Watching TV would be good if they somehow put birdsong on there, chanting. So there are many applications of this that I won't go into now. I'll just mention a possible application we could come back to someday, just to point to some possibilities for individual psychology before I go on to the fourth and final lap of this course. And this has to do with the question, why do people believe in UFOs? Why do people want to believe in corn circles? Or this is quite independent of whether UFOs are real or imaginary. It hardly matters, and not to put down UFOs. And why they would want to believe in God or monotheism, or there's one God, and so on. I think that the multiple personality chaos phenomenon is pretty universal in our culture. And there are heavily walled off regions. Walls were built at different stages in life, and the child part was sealed when there was an authoritarian, trustworthy emotional environment that had the illusion of absolute truth. So that part is sitting there, yearning for some validation from the outside world. Something like that would, if you wanted to try experiments, or you could write a book recommending experiments in social psychology in which the tendency of people to believe in God, you could try to affect it by playing music therapy for this chaotic religious belief. And in case of success, then restore pantheism, which is maybe badly needed at this time. Instead of going on with applications to fractals in the individual mind, I'd like to just go on to the collective mind, to our social sphere, and in this fourth and final part, and then we'll end with a couple of questions for you guys based on this idea. Well, I wouldn't have thought of this exactly, but I think Terence suggested that I was guilty of making a mathematical model for monogamy. And since that's true, I might as well share it with you. And this is it, in fact. We are there. So this is about the sandy beach in the collective mind. And, well, we could get to this collective mind stepwise, as in the forms of one. From nothing comes one, and then two, and then three. He says, after three, any mathematician can make infinity. So we've got one, now we can just step to two. What would be then the application of the sandy beach model to a social system consisting of two people? Now you have the two people, and there's some kind of mathematical model for the psyche. Not to be taken too seriously, but this is just what psychology does, makes Levine type models for the psyche, and now you've got like two of them, and then they start talking to each other, touching, cooking and eating together, or something like that, and then these two systems are coupled into one. And of course, the behavior of the coupled system is much more complicated than the behavior of parts, and the behavior of the coupled up complex system can't be predicted or even guessed at from the full knowledge of the behavior of the two parts. And besides, you would only know one of the parts if you're involved in this to a degree. This system then also has this dynamical system. I mean, the model is, not the people. And in the model, this complex system has attractors, that is to say, roost, loft, the movable loft, the fixed loft, and so on. And the bases colored red, green, and all the other things, and the boundaries in between either iron curtains or sandy beaches. And I suppose that monogamy means a contract or behavioral epiphenomenon in which some of the boundaries between the parts are heavily walled off. So that it is, as a matter of fact, a situation, unstable situation of just chaos. I'm not saying that order is always bad, but cosmos and chaos does have to be balanced. I wouldn't elevate chaos above cosmos or vice versa, but systems probably to be healthy, they need a certain balance, and understanding monogamy as an iron curtain and make it stable would require a balancing chaos elsewhere. And that's the idea. Otherwise, this multiple personality that's the system of two people would have the multiple personality, this chaos and out of balance situation in the direction of order, which, like the concrete wall doing its best to hold up the bank for life, is highly unstable. That's one application. Then we won't go into details, but considering two nations instead of two individuals, one also gets a model of this sort in which the stability of the complex system would require adequate balance of chaos and order. So those are the four parts, and let me just end with these questions for Rupert and Hare. So Rupert, this model suggests that you have to consider experiments with multiple lofts, and even with a single loft, have to consider experiments with multiple pigeons. And anyway, that's a consequence of your idea, your model of what's going on. And so I wonder what you think the results, maybe you already know the results of this that have been tried. It could, for the ancient Egyptian government, of course, mean success or failure in the war over the Hyksos. And for Terence, I think, I just wonder, what would this do to your idea to consider multiple attractors at the end of time? 2, 3, or more escatons. Nothing in what you said seemed to me prohibited this, other than a misplaced iron curtain of the monotheistic type that perhaps filtered the speech of the mushroom that came through your lips.
I see.
There you have it.
Can I just try and summarize what I think you said, because I'm not sure I've got it. Okay.
I never started it. Oops.
One element
Okay, we
is
got
the
14
personalities,
minutes. Bad.
and of course social relationships and international relations, and the behaviour of different groups of pigeons fall into different basins. And you can visualize that like being a landscape of different planets. And there is something in a particular region, or the world down in particular, and there's another region of the world in another one. And each of these basins represents a different kind of self-personality. within a marriage or a relationship, then each of the basins represents what we normally call a personality, each of which has sub-personalities within it. These are the different basins, and you seem to be pointing out these personalities are made up of different sub-personalities. A very fashionable view. Everybody is talking about sub-personalities. James Hillman says the polytheistic psychology, where you have the different gods and goddesses, not only representing the archetypes that we all go through, all these different ones, we're possessed by different gods or goddesses at different times. And we move from one to another. And we're not a single personality with different functions, but we're a kind of emulsion of all these different personalities. Then with the multiple personality praise and again, people are fascinated not just by serial killers, but by people with multiple personalities, and preferably both. Multiple personality, serial killers. Anyway, there's a fascination with multiple personality. With the Hillman thing, this is computer model used to be in the MIT multiple module. Daniel Dennett, the materialist philosopher, has the multiple theory of consciousness. So everywhere we find these multiple models, of which yours is one. And all of them seem to be saying that to get away from monotheism, which is reflected in psychology, but by the idea of a central ego, a dominating ego. We've got to get away from that too. To these more democratic models, where you have grassroots democracy, all these different personalities. That seems to be one gift in what you're saying. And that's one discussion, is whether or not a polytheistic model is possible, or whether indeed there has been any. Because in India, which is frequently called polytheistic, we have many gods, but we have all through all Indian traditions the idea of some state beyond all this, Brahma or Atman. And in every system where we actually have polytheism, we have some sense of an undifferentiated unity as well. So that's one point to discuss. The second point we're simply making is that the boundary between these different basins is not a straight line or a rigid wall, but rather a fractal boundary, namely one of ins and outs and curves and filigrees and patterns. And therefore, moving with that kind of boundary, moving from one to the other is very easy because you never quite know where you are, and you could cross the boundary without realizing it. Whereas if it's a rigid wall, it's difficult to get from one to the other. Is this safe?
Yes.
Right. Well, I'm not sure which points to take up first. I think I'll leave Pigeons aside for the time being. I think the idea of the plurality of models, I mean, I'm sure this is, you're right, Terence's model is monotheistic, and it has a single eschaton. And this takes us immediately to the plurality, into the polytheism versus monotheism. My view of polytheism is that polytheism in all its actual functional forms, even in its Catholic form, Catholicism in a sense is polytheism. You have all the angels, you have all the saints, you go into a cathedral with all those side chapels and shrines, just like a Hindu temple. You go into a Hindu temple, there's the goddess of this, and this is God of the planet, the god planet gods, and then there'll be this goddess, and this local god, and then this Ganesh, and then various other god, Hanuman, and that there'll be a central shrine, say a Shiva, or a Vishnu, which would represent the central unifying principle. So, most forms of polytheism are not radical polytheism. They're a plurality with some very vaguely defined overarching unity behind it. So the first point, allow you to mind an overarching unity.
No.
The radical polytheism.
I think my main message is what you described as the second point. It has to do with the rigidity of our region between. I think that everybody would agree that there's plurality in religion, in life, in the mind, in the stream, in the sky, and so on. And I think it's more important the rigidity of the boundaries in between. Do you worship in the Shiva temple and then you go to Ram? Is that okay? Or do you have to be faithful to brothers and so on. It's more the denial of what obviously children seem to exist that brings about this integration of the personality. To excessive usage of guns or drugs and stuff like that. Yes. They're porous to the point of...
Alright, so that finishes it up for the moment and lays a foundation for some detail to start developing here. As Eidolon naps. Say hello, Fuzzy. Eidolon the cat. I don't even think she's going to twitch. She just had a can of some kind of god-awful slime that smelled horrible. So she was very happy about that. Now she's comatose kitty. Anyway, so yeah, that just gets a little color variety happening, some mist starting to develop, and lays down a foundation for starting to do some detail and start digging into this composition. So I think that's it for the moment, though. So thanks for watching. That's Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Ranch in Taos, New Mexico, working on oil painting Suspended, or Suspension.
Based on
I think it's suspended. Yes, I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Okay, I'll double check that, but I want to call it suspended. So, have a good night, Earth.